And then this is the famous photo. It was in the Boston Globe and Boston.com today and was in Going.com. Mr. and Mrs. Charles Bennett. They lost 9 houses. Now these don't look like rich landlords. These look like broke people now. And Mrs. Bennett here. This is what they owned. Watching the fire. Everything that they lost is gone. And of course, the major quote that was heard during the Brant Rock Fire was, "I had no insurance." Mr. and Mrs. John Pratt. The newlyweds had just moved to Marshfield from Waltham only 3 days earlier before the fire lost everything. Fire hoses melted and caught fire. Over 70 year-round families had to be evacuated and relocated. And again, I go back to Selectman Bowles, Commissioner Garrity. Everybody chipped in with the Red Cross. Although I heard it was the story that I heard actually about the Red Cross that they were selling cups of coffee, whereas they were giving them out free at Right Starts. Helpless residents can only watch and pray. The folklore, and this is again, the folklore tells of the only injury recorded aside from singed eyebrows was an ash in the eye, but 13 Plymouth firefighters were treated on the scene for smoke inhalation. The sound was like the low growl of a hungry lion, is a quote. 30 cottages went up in the first 30 minutes. 300 went up in the next hour. It was the worst fire in New England since the Great Salem Fire of 1914 that took 2,000 structures. Taking coffee and donuts at Right Starts. Moments later, after this photo was taken for the people fighting the fire and residents of the area, moments later, Right Starts was gone. Structures burned and buckled and folded and collapsed within minutes. And of course, once a structure collapses, it sends sparks airborne, taken by the wind, to set off another structure. So the coastline then is ablaze. I'll be telling a story, I think, in a little while about a fisherman who sees this fire at sea. Now, let's just take a look at this one here. My friend over here picked out the other smoke plumes. What's going on up there? I mean, it looks like smoke, doesn't it? And this is after everything's pushed down. This is at the end of the fire. Everything's pushed down. The newly formed National Guard was called out. They were very busy in their initial deployment. I'm going to ask this in a second about a flying boat, if anybody remembers it then. Okay, there's a lot of folklore associated with this. There it is. Okay, so I've been told that a Coast Guard flying boat circled overhead taking photographs. Does anybody that was there, raise your hand if you were there during that day of the fire? Wow. What do you miss? Okay, I've asked people if they recall a Coast Guard flying boat circling overhead, a clipper. And 2 of the residents said they do not. But according, this is a, oh, that's a random photo of a flying boat. So the losses, well, can you go back, Chris? Losses of entire streets happened in 20-minute intervals from street to street to street. So the brilliance. She saved her husband's ashes, which were in an urn on the mantle, and her fire insurance had expired 2 days earlier. 2 thoughtful, and to this date unknown schoolgirls from Newton, and if you're here tonight, let me know, helped evacuate Mrs. Publicover and her valuable possessions. Is anybody from Newton here tonight? Okay. Smoke was seen from Nantucket, from Boston, and from Provincetown. Images of desperation and devastation, if we just take a look, we saw some of these earlier, but they're just a snapshot and a montage of different photographs. Some of the quality is poor indeed, but it just shows you the devastation and the raging fire. Okay. And then, the next day, a lot of people came from Abington. And at first I thought maybe Abington Village, but a lot of homeowners in Abington also owned a cottage property in Marshfield. And they came the next day, and they couldn't get into the area until National Guard and the police allowed them to matriculate into the area. Losses were total. There was nearly nothing to salvage. Nothing to salvage. In fact, Biff Henderson, who's not here tonight, told me he was given, what, 25 cents for every chimney that he knocked down the next day on the foundations. Winship store had just been fully stocked for the summer before it burnt. And it was, okay, and yeah, burnt to the ground. It was difficult to find your own foundation, or should I say, your own cinder pile that used to be your house. As far as the eye can see, or as far as the lenses of the camera extended above, the ruins of destroyed cottages stretch out on the shoreline of Brant Rock. This photo showing only the chimneys and foundations which remain was taken in Ward Fieldston, and taken from a song by Roger Daltrey. After the fire still burns. The casino fireplace. Now, does anybody want to, I've been told that's the casino fireplace, but Father Bill, do you agree with that?
That's my family's fireplace.
That's his family's fireplace. Hey, it's not the casino fireplace. Father Bill, can you tell me about that house there?
Yeah, we were there. Actually, the property was Hewitt's Point. The cottage my father bought in 1936 was the Hewitt's Point cottage. You can see trees that are there. I identify it very well. The trees used to be in front of a Dr. Boutwell's house, which was 2 doors away from ourselves. He had a wall. You can see the wall. It's on the right-hand side. And you can see the bend of the land going around to Hummerock and Situate and up in there. You're looking down Ocean Street, all the way on the telephone poles.
Yes, you trust us on this thing. Yeah. So, Father Bill, I will correct that. That is the O'Connor residence. A resident said Hitler couldn't have done worse. And again, as I mentioned before, it could have been, it looks like a village devastated by the Germans in World War II. War in all its fury, and again, war is on people's mind. The fire could spread no greater devastation over a resort than the leaping flames which leveled 500 cottages yesterday afternoon in the Fieldston Brant Rock section and left behind bleak ruins such as the bare trees and the tumbled chimney shown above. And then, yes, St. Anne's. The lead in the stained glass windows turned molten and the windows exploded outward. St. Anne's by the Sea, Mass was held to the Fieldston Ballroom for 1941 and 42. Automobile tires melted onto the road. Now, do you remember Old Girl? The one from Duxbury that was fighting the fire? Well, the fire got Old Girl. And Marshfield Fire Department in the town of Marshfield replaced that for them. Within an hour after the fire began, New England Telephone and Telegraph, with help from Chief Pratt, had hung an emergency wire from the old schoolhouse converted police station. So that's when New England Telephone and Telegraph jumped into action and hung a line just for Police Chief Pratt. And the Brockton Gas and Plymouth Electric companies got out ahead of the fire as it was raging, shutting off gas and electricity and collecting copper wire, which was very valuable. Now, it took less than 3 minutes for the casino to burn to the ground. The Ocean Bluff house was razed in 5 minutes. Police warned about exploding projectiles and missiles being launched from the casino. They're talking about exploded bottles of beer. And of course, the wrath of the conflagration, the fire recodified zoning laws. Cottages could no longer be built on top of one another or with cheap, dry beech wood. Chief Silas Wright lost his home and his store and he's, with Charles Sterrett. And this is Inspector Byron Hall and Postmaster Charles Sterrett looking at the safe. It saves them many valuables. John A. Gaffey, a year-rounder, lost everything. Landlord Charles Lowell lost 19 cottages. They had to count chimneys in order to determine how many houses were burned, and kids were given 50 cents. I said 25 cents. 50 cents for each one that was knocked down. By that evening, every homeless family had been provided with shelter. Selectman Robert S. Bowles commanded the bivouac. And it ended just after 5 p.m. at the corner of Ocean and Samoset Street.